Lazarus Core. Prologue. Recovered log Station Orpheus. Audio decryption level Theta. Voice print Dr. Ilara Voss. Timestamp +04 1807. Lazarus cycle. 8:32 we brought him back. Heart stopped, brain dead. Eyes clouded over like glass left in the yard. Cold. 4 minutes and 37 seconds of clinical death. No pulse, no spark. Dead until he wasn't. The Lazarus Core ignited like a silent storm. No bang, no flash. Just a hum that sank beneath your skin. When his chest rose again, none of us spoke. We just watched, waiting for the scream, the panic, the confusion that was supposed to follow. But he sat up, calm, still, smiling. And then he spoke. Not in English, not in any language we could identify. It sounded like stone breaking underwater. Ithra ran it through every linguistic filter we had. Turned out it wasn't speech. It was a pattern, a frequency, coordinates, not stellar, not spatial, dimensional. A place that shouldn't exist. A place calling itself back through him. Now the lights flicker when he walks past. The walls pulse like they're breathing. And the other corpses, the ones in stasis, they're starting to twitch. I thought we were gods, that we'd conquered death. But all we did was knock, and something knocked back. Thing knocked. Lazarus Core, Chapter 1. The wake, the silence wasn't unusual on Station Orpheus. In fact, it was engineered. Decades of design went into deadening the sounds of life in orbit. No echoing footsteps, no humming vents, no rattling panels. Just a perfect clinical hush to preserve the mental stability of the crew. But this silence felt wrong. Dr. Ilara Voss stood alone on observation deck Theta, arms crossed tight across her chest, a headache pounding at the base of her skull. Her breath fogged faintly on the inside of her helmet's visor, though the lab's oxygen was stable. She wasn't required to wear full gear here, not in sealed zones, but something about today made her keep it on. Beneath her, through reinforced glass, Subject Zero stirred in the Lazarus chamber, formerly Lieutenant Liam Calder. Now something else. He lay motionless on the polymer resurrection bed, bathed in the soft blue glow of the core's halo array. His chest rose and fell in perfect rhythm. Skin, once blistered, melted, was now pristine, pale, unmarked. New Ilara watched his eyes. They were open, wide, and empty. And they didn't blink. "Status report," she said, her voice tight. The reply came instantly through the comm implant. "Subject Zero remains stable," said Ithra, the station's AI. Its voice was neutral, toneless, a whisper in the bones. "Brain activity 87% normalized, heart rate 61 BPM. No signs of physical distress. Any voluntary movement? None in the past 36 minutes. Ilara turned away from the glass, trying to suppress the shiver that had crawled up her spine since the reanimation. It had worked. The Lazarus Core, a prototype resurrection reactor, powered by the orbiting neutron star's gravitational pressure, had done the impossible. They brought a dead man back to life. No cloning, no implants, no consciousness backups. This was him. Memories intact, DNA untouched. A perfect biological revival. A miracle. So why the hell did she feel like they just opened a door they were never meant to find? She crossed the lab floor, footsteps nearly silent on the insulated panels, and paused at the console. A replay button blinked softly. Ilara hovered her fingers over it, lips pressed in a hard line. She didn't want to hear it again, but she pressed it anyway. The recording crackled to life, audio only. "Oh, Sir Ak, the Nal." The words, or what passed for words, sounded like a throat full of broken glass, wet, deep, ancient. They rolled in a rhythm that felt deliberate, chant-like. It didn't sound like pain or confusion. It sounded like prayer. The timestamp matched the moment of Liam's revival. He had opened his mouth and spoken those syllables within 10 seconds of regaining consciousness. Not, "Where am I?" Not what happened, not who are you, just that sound. Ilara had run the file through every database Ithra had access to. Known languages, ancient dialects, even encrypted AI syntax. No matches. Until Ithra tried analyzing the waveform as data. The results weren't linguistic. They were numerical, coordinates. Not in three-dimensional space, not even in four. Mathematical. Impossibilities. Folds and vectors. Numbers that implied direction through non-Euclidean space. Like a location not outside the station but outside reality. She hadn't told the rest of the team. Not yet. They needed rest. The Lazarus trial had consumed nearly 30 continuous hours of labor. Now the others were asleep in quarters or drugged. Into dreams in the medbay. Only Alara remained awake. Only she had seen the smile. Below through the glass, Liam moved. The motion was slight, his fingers twitching once, then again. Slowly curling. His head tilted toward the ceiling. Then without warning he sat up. Alara froze. The gesture was smooth. Not robotic, not twitchy, like post-resuscitation seizures. It was precise, controlled, alive. He turned his head, angling it toward the observation. Then impossibly his eyes locked on hers. He couldn't see her. The glass was mirrored on his side. The deck lights were dim. And more than that, Ithra, Ilara said quietly, what is Subject Zero's visual status? A pause. Then, ocular nerves remain non-functional. Optic tissue is intact, but neural pathways are incomplete. Subject is clinically blind. She stared. Liam didn't blink. Didn't turn away. He was still looking right at her. The breath caught in her throat. A subtle flicker passed through the room. Lights dimmed. One of the console screens blinked, then reset. Power flux, her helmet. Speakers vibrated. Not a sound, but a low, rattling pulse. And then inside her skull, not over the speaker, inside her mind, a voice whispered, I remember you. The whisper disappeared. The lights returned to normal. The console stabilized, but Alara didn't move. Below, Liam smiled. Not with joy, not with relief, but with a kind of cold knowing. As if whatever now wore his skin had been waiting. Chapter 2. False positives at 0429 hours. Shidar Orbital Time Crew. Log. Dr. Nico Ayan, Neuropharmacology Lead. The brain is a liar, a brilliant liar. It will make you see ghosts in static, hear voices in silence, feel movement in dead limbs. And sometimes it does this to protect you. But sometimes it does it because it's not your brain anymore. Nico Ayan didn't believe in ghosts, but the feeling in his gut didn't care what he believed. He sat in Medbay 2, half asleep in his chair, watching Subject Zero's latest neural scan spiral across the display. His coffee was cold. His hands were steady, but his mind was screaming. It was the delta wave pattern, perfect symmetry, sustained for over an hour. No fluctuations, no decay, no external stimulation. That was impossible. Human brains didn't operate in clean math. They were chaos engines, neural storms, chemical swamps, but this was organized. It was a message pretending to be a brain. He rubbed his temples and leaned back, glancing toward the sealed doors at the far end of the medbay. They led down to isolation, where Subject Zero was now resting. The sedatives had barely touched him. Nico had quadrupled the dosage. Nothing, heart rate steady, no change in reflexes, no pupil dilation. And worst of all, no sleep. For 13 hours now, Subject Zero had been awake, motionless, staring at the ceiling, not responding to light, sound, or speech, just smiling. Nico took a long, tired breath and flicked on the comm. Ilara, he said. You up? No. Answer. I'm looking at his latest scan. You want to tell me why his neural pattern looks like a goddamn Fibonacci spiral? Still nothing. He frowned. Ilara. Comm static crackled faintly in reply. Then, just for a moment, a sound, a wet scraping noise, something organic, like fingernails across soft tissue. Nico froze, then he killed the channel. He wasn't the superstitious type. He didn't believe in hauntings or demons or any of the stories the older orbital engineers liked to tell to rookies on their first long drift. But this station was starting to feel wrong. It was little things at first. The way certain doors took just a second too long to open. The way the water tasted metallic some mornings. The way shadows shifted ever so slightly when no one was moving. Then came the power flickers. The dreams. Now the comms were bleeding strange. Feedback, like something breathing inside the line. He tapped the console again, re-pulled the biometric logs from Subject Zero's recovery chamber. There it was. 4 minutes after revival, Liam had spoken. Nico had been in the medbay when it happened, standing 10 feet away. He remembered the look on the subject's face. Not confused, not scared, just focused, as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. He played the audio again, though he didn't want to. Sirak Danal. The words echoed out of the speaker, low and layered, like multiple voices trapped inside one throat. Nico swallowed hard. He didn't know what that sound was. But he was starting to think it wasn't human. Just as he was reaching for the console to shut it down, the lights dimmed, then flared. The biometric display glitched, every panel on the console flickering once, then aligning into a perfect column. Lines of code he didn't recognize began scrolling across the screen. And then it stopped. New window opened on its own. Coordinates, same as before. Except now there were 2 sets. Nico stared at them. The second one pulsed red. Below it, one word appeared in a language the computer shouldn't know. Awakening. The lights flickered, again. And from the hallway just beyond the medbay, something knocked. Once, twice. A slow, deliberate rhythm. Nico stood up, heart hammering. There was no scheduled maintenance. No night shift movement allowed on this deck. He stepped toward the door, hand hovering over the manual lock override. The knock came again, closer this time, and from the other side of the steel, something whispered, "Let me in, Dr. Ayan." Chapter 3. The Eye of God, 0456 hours. Observation deck. Theta Dr. Alara Voss. Private log, unsent they say. When you stare into the void, it stares back. But they never said it would recognize you. Alara had been standing motionless for almost an hour. She didn't remember sitting down, but her legs had gone numb beneath her. She was on the floor now, backed into the corner of the observation deck, her helmet off, skin pale with cold sweat. Her breath came shallow and uneven. Liam hadn't moved. He still sat in the Lazarus chamber below, blind eyes fixed straight up at the mirrored glass, straight into her, smiling, patient, waiting. For what? Ithra had been silent since the last flicker. The AI wasn't offline, but it was slower. Off somehow. She'd issued 4 commands in the last 20 minutes. 2 had been ignored, and 1 came back with a response she couldn't interpret. Request rejected. Integrity compromised. System behavior under revision. What the hell did that even mean? Alara forced herself up, leaning against the console for balance. Her legs trembled. She tapped her comm unit. "Dr. Ayan. Nico, are you online? I need your eyes on something." No reply. She tapped again. "Nico." Just static. Then a breath. Not hers. "He's almost ready." The voice wasn't Nico's. It was deeper, wider, like it echoed from inside something vast and hollow. It felt more like a presence than a sound, brushing her eardrum like a hand pressed to her skull. Alara yanked the earpiece out, heart slamming against her ribs. Her vision swam. She needed answers. Something she could measure. Something she could control. She pulled up Subject Zero's full neural map again. It hadn't changed. Still that same spiral pattern. Still mathematically precise. Still inhuman. She ran a pulse scan, one of the diagnostic tools not directly tied into Ithra, an older, slower system, but analog enough to be trustworthy. It loaded slowly, scanning the electromagnetic field of the subject's brain activity. Then something strange happened. The field expanded. Not a glitch. not a false positive. The scan detected the signal bleeding outside Subject Zero's body, out into the chamber walls, into the power grid, into the station. That shouldn't be possible. The human brain's field was small, fragile. Even in a heightened state, it couldn't extend past the skull, unless this wasn't a human brain anymore. The scan stopped. The data froze. Her screen filled with a single looping phrase. The host is merely a door. She backed away, blood draining from her face. Outside the glass, Liam stood. Not sat. Stood. He hadn't moved. She hadn't seen him rise, but he was standing now, facing her directly, his neck craned slightly, as if listening. And behind him, just for a second, the Lazarus Core pulsed, a light deeper than red, a color that ached to look at. It shimmered, like liquid geometry, folding in on itself. Then it was gone, but Liam was still there, smiling. She turned and bolted from the room, down the corridor, lights flickering above her, emergency strips strobing faint blue along the floor. Her boots echoed, louder than they should have. The station was too quiet again, that muffled underwater silence that made her skin crawl. She passed 2 empty corridors, no signs of Nico, no signs of life. As she neared the lift, the comms flickered on their own. Static bled in, followed by overlapping voices, dozens, hundreds, whispering in unison, in sync with the humming vibration in the walls. He is the vessel. We are the flame. We remember you, Alara Voss. You were the first to believe. She screamed and ripped the comm unit from her suit, throwing it down the hallway. The whispers followed her anyway. When the lift opened, she stumbled in and slammed her fist against the command pad. Command lockdown authorization. Voss 7 green sector, Lazarus containment status, pending, access denied. Error, Subject 0 has override. Her hand froze. She hadn't coded him with command clearance, no. One had, and yet, the system had given him control, like he asked for it, like the station recognized him. Alara staggered back, slumped against the lift wall, her breath hitching. She looked up at the camera mounted in the corner of the lift. A small red light blinked. Watching, recording, and somewhere from the depths of the station below, the core whispered again. Not through speakers, not through data, but through everything. Your body is yours, for now. Chapter 4. The Tethering for 2 hours. Medbay 2. Dr. Nico Ayen, private log, unsent. You think you understand the limits of the human mind, but that's only because you've never looked too closely at the walls inside it. The mind has no edge. It is a chasm. And if you keep looking long enough, something will look back. Nico's hands trembled as he ran them over his face, the soft sting of cold water from the sink grounding him in the sterile quiet of Medbay 2. He could still feel the phantom pulse in his skull, the aftertaste of the voice that had whispered, in his ear. It hadn't been his mind playing tricks on him, he was sure of that. Whatever it was that spoke, it wasn't him, and it wasn't Alara either. He knew her voice, knew her patterns of speech. This voice was deeper, older, like the remnants of something trapped for too long, something waiting. He wiped his face again, shaking his head. He had to focus. He was a scientist, a neuropharmacologist, not some paranoid wreck who'd stumbled into a bad dream. Still, the message didn't leave his head. Let me in, Dr. Ayen. The knock at the door had been slow at first, measured. 3 distinct raps. Nico had stepped to the door without thinking. He'd been so sure it was Alara. She'd been on edge and he figured she needed him. But when he opened it, there was no one there. Nothing but the empty hallway. The air was colder. That was the first thing he noticed. And the second thing? The door panel on the opposite side of the hall had been pried open. From the inside, Nico had stepped closer to investigate, his breath catching when he saw the long, jagged scratch marks across the metal. Scratches that hadn't been made by a tool, by something else. His stomach churned. He couldn't think about that now. He had to focus. The intercom buzzed again, crackling to life. Dr. Ayen, are you there? Ilara's voice, at last. Nico took a deep breath, his hand still shaking, as he picked up the comm. "Yeah, I'm here." "What's going on?" Her voice came through urgent. "Nico, something's happening in the Lazarus chamber, something in him. You need to get down here." Nico didn't have to be told twice. He slammed the comm down, hurrying toward the door. Every step felt heavier, the sensation of being watched pressing in from all sides. The hallway stretched before him like a labyrinth, too quiet, too long. His boots clicked with the kind of echo that made it feel like the entire station was listening. And then, somewhere deep within the station, the hum began. It wasn't just the typical sounds of the core or the engines, but something different, something far more resonant. It sank into his bones, thrumming in time with his heartbeat. The floor vibrated underfoot, sending a ripple of unease through his spine. His hand gripped the emergency rail as he moved through the halls faster, crossing the zero-gravity threshold and into the elevator shaft. He punched the Lazarus deck's code into the console, willing the doors to open. The hum grew louder. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was alive. The elevator jerked to life with a sharp jolt, and as the doors slid open, Nico stepped out onto the Lazarus containment deck. What he saw in the chamber was enough to make his stomach lurch. Liam wasn't sitting anymore. He was standing, at the center of the resurrection bed, eyes wide and staring. His back arched unnaturally, as though something was pulling him upward, stretching his spine beyond its limits. His mouth opened, though his jaw shouldn't have been able to move. "That far, help me, please. Help me." The voice wasn't Liam's. It was a distorted, garbled version of it, warped by something far deeper. The air crackled around him, thick with static. And then, to Nico's horror, the Lazarus Core flickered violently, its pale blue halo shifting and warping like liquid glass. The chamber lights dimmed, and a low hum, similar to the one Nico had felt in the hallways, began to grow louder. "Shut it off," Nico screamed. But there was no response. He sprinted toward the containment panels, pulling up diagnostics, slamming the override key. But the system was unresponsive. The entire chamber was locked down. And then, before his eyes, a thin line of crimson began to spread across Liam's skin, curling like smoke beneath the surface. It was as though something inside him was alive and moving, pushing against the vessel of his body. The wall-mounted monitors flickered again. A message scrolled across the main display. "The host is eternal." Then the hum shifted again, a flash of light. Nico screamed as he staggered backward, a crushing weight slamming into his chest. The room felt colder now, colder than any cryo chamber, colder than the vacuum outside. And then the voice came again. "Let me in, Nico." The air turned suffocating, the hum overwhelming. He stumbled back, the floor beneath him buckling. His vision blurred. Everything around him went dark. Chapter 5. The Echoes of Silence, 0613 hours. Observation Deck Theta. Dr. Ilara Voss. Private log unsent. What is dead may never die, but it is not the body that is reborn. It is the soul that changes. Ilara had never seen anything like it. She couldn't decide which was worse. The fact that the Lazarus Core had allowed Liam's resurrection in the first place, or that now, standing before him, she didn't even know who or what he was anymore. Liam was not himself. His physical form was human. There was no denying that. His flesh was perfect, unmarred by the fires of his initial death. His eyes were no longer vacant. Now they were sharp, bright, unnervingly aware. But something else lay beneath that surface. A presence, something other, that had burrowed deep inside him. It wasn't the Liam she remembered. He wasn't Liam. The Lazarus Core had done something it was never supposed to. It had pulled a soul from the void and tethered it to flesh. But in the process, something else had attached itself. Something that had crossed the threshold between life and death. And now it was inside. The creature inside Liam was growing stronger. Ilara stood, alone in the observation deck, watching the chamber below. The air was thick with tension. Outside, the stars barely gleamed, distant, indifferent. The station was silent again, but it wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. Liam stood at the center of the chamber, perfectly still, the glow of the Lazarus Core pulsed rhythmically around him, casting eerie shadows across his body. His head tilted slightly to one side as if listening to a sound only he could hear. His hands were clasped loosely in front of him, but Alara could see the way his fingers twitched slightly, like something was trying to break free beneath his skin. She had to do something. She couldn't just wait. She turned toward the terminal and activated the comm. The crackling noise that answered her sent a chill through her spine. "Nico, are you there?" Nothing. Just static. Her breath caught. "Nico, answer me. I need you. Now." Still nothing. The comm went silent. Her pulse quickened, panic setting in. "Please," she whispered to herself, turning back toward the Lazarus chamber. "Please tell me this isn't happening." Then the comm flickered back on. But the voice that came through wasn't Nico's. Alara. It was a low, rasping sound, deep and ancient. "I remember you." Liam's voice, or something that sounded like echoed through the comm. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. No, this wasn't right. He couldn't speak to her like that. "You're the one who believed," it continued. "The first to pull me from the abyss." Ilara's legs almost buckled beneath her. She had to steady herself, gripping the console tightly. Down in the Lazarus chamber, Liam's body began to shift. His posture straightened, then jerked forward as if yanked by an invisible force. His eyes locked with hers through the glass, those perfect pupils burning into her like twin stars. His lips curled into a smile that wasn't his, the smile of something much older, much colder. "No," Ilara whispered. And then, through the glass, the lights flickered again. Just like before. Sharp, unnaturally bright, and then dimming. To almost nothing. The soft hum of the core grew louder, vibrating in her chest. The screens on the wall began to glitch, rapidly cycling through lines of strange symbols. Ilara watched in horror as a new series of codes flashed onto the monitor. Access granted. Liaison connection established, convergence of the chosen awakening complete. The air grew dense, oppressive. It felt as if the very walls of Station Orpheus were closing in on her, trapping her within the cycle of something that had no end. She spun around, desperate for an answer, for a sign that the madness wasn't consuming her. She checked her datapad for the 5th time in the last 10 minutes, but all the systems were locked, frozen. The station's mainframe wasn't responding. Her only choice now was to reach Nico. But where was he? A faint crack from behind her broke the stillness. A soft, wet sound. Ilara whipped around. From the corner of the room, a shadow detached itself from the dark. A figure stumbled into view. Nico. His face was pale, more than pale. It was as if the blood had drained from his skin entirely. His eyes were wide, unblinking, pupils dilated. His clothes were torn. "Nico?" Ilara's voice broke through the silence. She took a step toward him. "What happened? What the hell?" He didn't speak. Instead, he stumbled forward, collapsing to his knees before her. His hands trembled as he reached out toward her, grabbing onto her arms with a force that felt too strong for a man in his condition. "It's inside me," he whispered, his voice thin, strained. It's inside me now." Before Ilara could respond, Nico's eyes rolled back in his head, and his entire body lurched violently, as if something was tearing its way out from the inside. A sharp crack echoed through the room. Nico's mouth opened wide, and a twisted, guttural growl emerged from his throat, a noise that didn't belong in a human body. His skin stretched, strained, and his veins pulsed, blackened, as though something ancient, dark, and malicious was crawling through his bloodstream, taking root. From the Lazarus chamber below, Liam's head tilted, and a low laugh echoed from within him, deep, distorted, a mockery of the sound it once was. The walls shook, and in that moment, Ilara realized something that chilled her to the core. The core had never resurrected Liam. It had just opened a door, and whatever came through was not leaving. Chapter 6. Unholy Tethers 723 Hours. Lazarus Containment Deck. Dr. Alara Voss. Private Log, unsent. The dead don't come back, not in pieces, not in whispers, not in souls that know the taste of the abyss. The air inside the Lazarus containment deck was thick, suffocating. Ilara could feel the weight of something pressing down on her chest, making it difficult to breathe. The dim lights flickered as the walls groaned under some unseen pressure, like the station itself was being squeezed from the inside. She stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, staring down at Nico. His body jerked and trembled, as though some invisible force was tearing him apart from the inside out. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, too wide. His mouth was open in a silent scream, and yet no sound escaped. It was as if he were being swallowed whole by something unseen, something that had burrowed deep inside him. She wanted to run, to do something, but she couldn't. Fear had rooted her to the spot. Nico's body twisted and contorted unnaturally, his skin pulling tight across his bones, as if something was changing him. She could see the veins beneath his skin pulsing, darkening, spreading like a disease through his body. And then the voice came again, that low, guttural tone, not Nico's, but something else, something alien. It resonated in her skull, in the deepest recesses of her mind. We are the gateway. We are the tether. The past, the present, and the future are ours to rewrite. Ilara staggered back, her hands flying to her ears, trying to block out the voice that was no longer just a sound but a presence. It was inside her, filling her mind, bending her thoughts. The calm crackled back to life. Ilara. Ilara, are you there? The voice was familiar, Nico's voice weak and strained. But there was something off about it. Nico, she whispered, but her voice was drowned out by the static. She forced herself to focus. She had to find him, had to stop this before it consumed them both. Where are you? She asked aloud, trying to steady her shaking hands as she reached for the comm. There was a brief pause before the response came, distorted, as if Nico's voice was being torn apart by something bigger than both of them. I'm not Nico anymore. I am beyond the flesh. I am part of it. I am the door. Ilara's blood ran cold. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber around her began to shift. It wasn't the building creaking under strain. No, this was something else. The entire space felt like it was warping, stretching as if reality itself were bending. The glass that separated her from Liam cracked, splintering along its surface, though it didn't break. It just shifted. And then she saw it. Liam stood. His form was no longer entirely human. He was changing, becoming something more, a hybrid of man and something ancient. His skin shimmered with an unnatural sheen, his eyes glowing with an unholy light. His body, though still recognizable, seemed almost transparent, as though he were being pulled between dimensions, caught somewhere between life and death. Liam reached toward the glass, his hand pressing against it, and the core pulsed behind him, bright, blinding. The station seemed to vibrate with the energy emanating from the Lazarus chamber, as though the very air was alive with the hum of something powerful, something ancient. You should have never opened it. His voice was deep, layered with echoes, and it reverberated in Ilara's bones. She couldn't tear her eyes away, her body frozen in place as she stared at him. The entity inside Liam had grown, matured, and now it was aware. The hum intensified. A high-pitched ringing filled her ears, and Ilara's vision blurred as the walls of the station began to distort, folding in on themselves. It wasn't just the Lazarus chamber now. It was the entire deck. She could feel the core reaching out, stretching its influence beyond the confines of the room, infecting every inch of the station. The air crackled with static, with the weight of something massive, something incomprehensible. Nico's body had stopped moving. He lay on the floor, still and silent. But when Ilara reached down to check for a pulse, she froze. There was nothing, no heartbeat, no breath, but the darkness in his eyes. It wasn't empty. It was full of something else, something that stared back at her with knowledge far beyond human understanding. His eyes seemed to glow now, faintly. And then, Nico spoke. Not with his mouth, but in her mind. We are the end, and you are the beginning. Ilara recoiled, stumbling backward, her heart racing in her chest. Her hands shook uncontrollably, and she felt as if the floor beneath her were shifting, tilting. No. No. You're still in there, Nico. Fight. But there was no fight left in him. The Nico she knew was gone. The hum grew louder. Ilara's breath quickened as her mind struggled to hold on to some shred of reality, but it was slipping away from her. The core had already taken Nico. It was taking Liam too, and now it was coming for her. The door behind her opened with a hiss, and Ilara turned in time to see another figure step into the room. It was him, Captain Adrian Wells. But something was off. His uniform was torn, his eyes wild, and his face was covered in a sheen of sweat. Bloodstains marred his clothing. Ilara, we need to go. Now. But before she could respond, the lights flickered once more. A deep, resonant thrum echoed through. The station and the floor beneath them groaned. No one leaves. The voice came again, only now it was everywhere. In the walls, in the air, inside her head. You opened the door. Now you are part of it. The Lazarus Core pulsed one final time. The station shuddered, and the lights went out. Chapter 7. The Fracture 0830 Hours. Crew Quarters Deck 4. Captain Adrian Wells. Private Log. Unsent. The line between sanity and madness is thinner than we ever realized. We've crossed it, and now we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting to remember what it even means to be human. Adrian could hear it. The hum, the tremor in the air, the thing that had been growing in intensity ever since the station went silent. It wasn't the core anymore. It wasn't just the interference in the systems. It wasn't even the whispers that filled the hallways like some creeping, invisible disease. It was them. Whatever had gotten into Nico, into Liam, into the very fabric of this station, had spread. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't a biological infection. No, this was something far worse. Something alive, and it had consumed everything. Adrian had no idea how long it had been since they'd lost power to the station's outer systems. It didn't matter anymore. They were stuck. Or worse, trapped. The emergency lights flickered dimly in the EIDIS hallways, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and pulse with a life of their own. The corridors were empty. Silent, empty, save for the distant footsteps. The scraping sound, the sound that followed them. He turned to Ilara, her face pale, her eyes sunken and wide with the same exhaustion and fear that had claimed the others. We need to get to the escape pods, Adrian said, his voice low, steady. We can't stay here. But Ilara didn't respond immediately. She just stared at the walls, her breathing shallow. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. They're all dead, Adrian. Adrian's chest tightened. He'd seen the bodies. The crew members who had been caught in the initial surge of the Lazarus experiment, twisted, their bodies mangled beyond recognition. But it wasn't the bodies that terrified him now. It was the way they had died. The core didn't just revive them, Ilara continued, her voice barely a whisper. It transformed them. The people who were inside those bodies are gone. What's left is something else, something that feeds. Adrian took a step toward her, his boots heavy on the cold metal floor. That's why we need to get out, he said firmly. It's not just the Lazarus project. It's the whole damn station. It's all connected. We have to cut off the source. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Adrian turned just in time to see something skitter across the hallway, too fast to be human. A pale shape darting in and out of the shadows. Adrian's pulse quickened. Reached for his sidearm, fingers tight around the grip. What was that? Lara whispered, but Adrian didn't answer. His instincts screamed at him to move, to get to the pod bay. Every second spent in this cursed place felt like a risk. Every corner, every hallway held something waiting. He motioned for Ilara to follow. Him, and they moved cautiously through the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the dead silence. The air grew colder as they neared the stairwell leading to the lower decks, and then they heard it again, the sound of something scraping along the metal floor, like nails across a chalkboard. This time, it was closer. Too close. Adrian turned, eyes scanning the shadows. The low hum of the station's core was like a drumbeat, building in intensity, vibrating the very walls. Out of the darkness, a figure appeared. Nico, but not Nico. Not anymore. His face was twisted in agony, his once human, features contorted in ways that no human body should be able to endure. His skin had become pallid, stretched tight over bones, and his eyes had gone completely black, like pits of ink. The veins running through his neck and arms pulsed with that same unnatural blackness. It was as though whatever had been inside him had fully consumed him, leaving only a vessel behind. He stumbled forward, dragging his feet along the floor, his body jerking with every movement. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. It was only when he was just a few feet from them that his mouth split wide, revealing rows of jagged, serrated teeth that glinted in the dim light like they had been waiting to bite into something. Adrian didn't hesitate. He pulled his weapon from its holster, the weapon's barrel already trained on Nico's face. But before he could fire, a deafening shriek filled the air. It wasn't Nico's voice. It was the voice of the thing inside him. Adrian squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed, the recoil harsh in his hands, but Nico, or what was left of him, barely flinched. Instead, the bullet ricocheted off the creature's skull, the sound of impact almost metallic. It didn't seem to matter. Nico kept coming. "Ilara, move!" Adrian shouted. Ilara didn't need to be told twice. She bolted past him, running toward the nearest maintenance door, her footsteps echoing louder than the horror closing in behind them. Adrian fired again. And again. This time Nico's chest tore open in a grotesque display of muscle and bone, but he kept coming. His limbs jerked and twitched unnaturally, like a puppet whose strings had been yanked too violently. "I'll hold it off," Adrian yelled. But even as he spoke, he knew it was a lie. It wasn't Nico anymore. It was something else. And whatever it was stronger than anything he could stop. Adrian turned and ran after Ilara, moving as fast as his legs would carry him. The hallway seemed endless, but finally they reached the bulkhead leading to the escape pods. "I've got it," Ilara said, tapping furiously at the control panel. The doors hissed open, but before either of them could step inside, the floor beneath them trembled. The hum was louder now. The entire station felt like it was shaking apart. And then, from the shadows, another figure emerged. Liam. But again, it wasn't him. Not anymore. He stood in the doorway of the pod bay, his body impossibly tall, his skin glowing with an unnatural light. His eyes, those glowing, malevolent eyes, locked onto theirs. "You opened the door. You cannot leave." His voice was not just a sound anymore. It was a force, presence that pressed against their minds, filling their heads with visions, with whispers, with screams. Adrian's hand tightened around his weapon. But he knew they were out of time. "Ilara, we need to go. Now." But Ilara was frozen. Her eyes locked on Liam, the terror evident in every feature. And then, in the next instant, the world around them fractured. Chapter 8. The Last Threshold, 932 hours. Escape Pod Bay, Deck 7, Captain Adrian Wells, Private Log unsent. We are not just fighting the station anymore. We're fighting ourselves. And the line between us and the thing we've unleashed is gone. The escape pod bay was a cold, sterile space, every corner lined with polished metal and flickering emergency lights. Adrian stood at the threshold, the door to the pod bay wide open. Behind him, the sound of movement, a skittering, chittering sound, was getting closer. Ilara was already inside the nearest pod, her hand hovering over the controls. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt and sweat, eyes wide and frantic. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at the open bay door where Liam stood, his glowing eyes fixed on them, unwavering. "You can't escape." Liam's voice echoed, deep and resonant, as though coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You are mine now, all of you." Adrian's fingers twitched around the grip of his weapon. It felt useless now. The things they'd unleashed, the twisted versions of the people they had once been, they were beyond their reach. There was no fighting them, there was no way out. Alara's voice broke through his thoughts, her words trembling but urgent. "Adrian, we have to go. We're not safe here." He turned to her, the cold realization sinking in deeper. "You don't get it, Alara," Adrian said, his voice sharp, raw with fear and frustration. "There's no way out. The station is alive now, and it's hunting us." But Alara didn't stop. She slammed her hand down on the pod's control panel, the hatch closing with a heavy thud. It was a sound that echoed in the empty silence, final, like the closing of a tomb. Adrian stepped forward, almost stumbling, his heart racing. He could hear the creature's footsteps getting closer. It wasn't Liam anymore. Not the Liam he knew, not even the Liam he had feared. It was something worse, something more. The creature, the entity inside him, had taken root in the very walls of the station, and now it was growing, spreading. Adrian's mind raced. He glanced back at the control panel, his thoughts splintering as he tried to think through the horror of the situation. The station was sinking into madness. They'd activated the Lazarus Core. They had raised the dead. But what they hadn't realized, what none of them had understood, was that the core didn't just bring people back. It bound them to something else, something that fed on life, that reached through the boundaries of space and time. Liam had been the first. Nico had followed. And now, the station itself was the next. The core was the vessel, and they had become the sacrifice. "You can't escape. Not from me." Liam's voice reverberated again, and this time it wasn't just a voice. It was a presence. The air grew colder. The walls rattled as though they were being twisted by unseen hands. The hum that had once been a mere background noise was now a piercing screech that cut through everything, vibrating the very bones of the station. Adrian gritted his teeth, his pulse pounding in his ears. "I'm not leaving you, Alara." She looked up at him, eyes wide, filled with unshed tears. She looked so small, so fragile, sitting there in the pod, hands trembling over the controls. But there was no time to reassure her, no time to give comfort. He stepped into the pod, slamming the hatch shut behind him, the cold steel sealing them in. The entire pod vibrated as the emergency systems kicked in, locking them in place. Adrian took a deep breath, staring at the control console in front of him. Outside, he could hear it, the sound of something scraping along the walls. Something was coming. The creature, Liam, Nico, the others. They were all part of it now. The air in the pod was thick, heavy with the weight of what had happened, of what they had done. The sound of the creature's approach was unmistakable. Its hunger echoed through the metal corridors, and Adrian could feel it in the very marrow of his bones. Alara's voice was strained, barely audible. "Adrian, we're not going to make it, are we?" Adrian didn't answer. He couldn't. The control panel blinked to life as Alara frantically punched in the commands for launch, but the station seemed to resist them at every turn. The pods were supposed to be a failsafe, supposed to be their escape, their last chance at survival. But now it was as if the station itself didn't want to let them leave. He grabbed her hand. "We have to get out of here." Another crash echoed through the bay. A massive shape slammed against the door of the pod bay, the metal screaming in protest. Adrian's breath hitched. He could hear the low, rattling growl that came from the thing. Outside, the thing that had once been Liam, once been human. "It's too late," the voice came from nowhere, from everywhere. And then the pod's control panel flared up, the emergency lights blinking in a frenzied strobe. The ship shook harder, more violently now. The hum from the core grew louder, and the walls shuddered as if they were being pulled toward something unseen. Elara looked up at him, her eyes wide, her face pale. What do we do now? Adrian's mind raced. Their options were few. They could stay here in the pod and hope they could get away before the station tore them apart. Or they could risk it. Risk everything and try to escape through the maintenance tunnels. It was a long shot, but it was the only one they had left. I'm not letting it take us, Adrian said, his voice barely a whisper. Then the pod doors opened wide with a shriek of metal on metal, and for a moment, Adrian thought his heart would stop. A figure stood in the doorway, a grotesque version of Nico, its face distorted, eyes black and hollow. Its body was twisted and unnaturally tall, stretching upward like a nightmare made flesh. And behind it, in the shadows, Liam's glowing eyes. Watch them. You are ours now, Liam intoned, his voice louder now, reverberating through every inch of the station. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. We are not yours. He pulled Elara to her feet, pushing the control panel one last time, and the pod's thrusters ignited with a deafening roar, propelling them forward. But as the pod broke free from the station, the last thing Adrian saw was the flickering light of the Lazarus Core, pulsing with an eerie glow, and then the void. Chapter 9. Aftermath. 25 hours. Escape pod, unknown location. Dr. Elara Voss, private log, unsent. Space is supposed to be silent, but we are not alone. The pod drifted through the vast, empty expanse of space, the only sound the soft hum of its failing engines and the shallow breaths of Elara and Adrian. The cold of space pressed against the pod's fragile hull, a reminder of just how far they had fallen, from a thriving crew to two survivors, barely clinging to the remnants of their sanity. Elara's hands shook as she clutched the armrest, eyes darting around the small, cramped space. The control panel flickered erratically, but it was still functional. They were alive, barely, but alive was a fleeting concept now. She glanced at Adrian, who was slumped in the seat beside her, his eyes closed, his breathing uneven. He hadn't spoken in hours, hadn't moved. He looked like a man on the edge of complete collapse, and she couldn't blame him. She felt the same. The horrors they had witnessed, the bodies, the whispers, the relentless, unyielding presence of the Lazarus Core. It was too much to process, too much to understand. Elara forced herself to focus on the present, on the fact that they were no longer on the station. They had escaped. For now, that was all that mattered. But then why did she feel this gnawing sense of dread? Why did the cold emptiness of space feel oppressive? Wasn't this what they had fought for? Freedom? Safety? She rubbed her face with a trembling hand, trying to shake the thought from her mind. But something wasn't right. The pod's artificial gravity flickered out for a moment, and Elara's stomach lurched as she floated slightly. She adjusted the controls, steadying herself. The thrusters were weak. They wouldn't be able to survive like this for much longer. They needed a plan. They needed a way to reach civilization, to get help. But as the pod drifted through the cold, empty void, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The sensation gnawed at her, the way the air felt thicker somehow, the strange hum she could feel deep in her bones. It was subtle at first, just a vibration against the hull, but it grew stronger, almost imperceptible, like the pod itself was being pulled in some direction. She turned her eyes to the viewport, watching the endless stretch of blackness beyond. The stars were distant, cold pinpricks of light scattered across the void. There was no sign of their station, no sign of any other ship, nothing. Just space. But then for a brief moment something caught her eye, a flicker of movement in the distance. At first she thought it was a trick of the light, but it came again. Something large, something moving. Adrian. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible, over the growing hum. She reached out to shake him, her fingers brushing against his arm. Adrian, wake up, there's something out there. Adrian stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He blinked at her, disoriented for a moment, then followed her gaze out the viewport. His face hardened, the fatigue suddenly giving way to a sharp, immediate tension. "What is it?" Alara didn't answer. She just pointed, her fingers trembling as she traced the movement in the distance. There was something out there, a massive shape outlined against the stars. It was too large to be debris, too purposeful to be a random object floating in space. It was moving toward them. Adrian's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the shape. "It's a ship. A damn big one. But no ship should have been out here. No ship should have been anywhere near this part of space. They had been far from any known routes. The chances of encountering another vessel were almost non-existent. And yet there it was, growing larger, getting closer. Ilara's heart pounded as the realization hit her. It was no ordinary ship. The shape was too irregular, the edges too jagged, and there was something about the way it moved, something unnatural about it, as though it were being pulled by some unseen force. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the ship shifted, almost imperceptibly. The hull seemed to shimmer, as though reality itself were warping around it. The hum in the pod grew louder. It was a low, vibrating pulse that made her bones ache, a sound that resonated deep inside her. It felt familiar. It was the same frequency she had felt on the station, the same resonance that had echoed through the walls of Lazarus Core. No, it can't be. Adrian's voice was low, strained. "It's the core, the Lazarus Core, it's following us." Ilara's stomach dropped. The ship, whatever it was, wasn't just some random passing vessel. It was connected to the Lazarus Core. It was drawn to them, drawn to the energy of the Lazarus experiment. Whatever had been awakened by the core had followed them. She slammed her fist against the pod's control panel, trying to power up the thrusters, trying to get them moving. But the pod systems were failing, flickering in and out of function. The pod groaned, its hull vibrating as if it too were struggling to hold together under the pressure. The ship was closing in. "We need to go," Ilara muttered, her voice rising with panic. Adrian didn't respond right away. He was staring at the viewport, his face pale, his eyes locked on the looming shape. "It's too late to run, Ilara. Whatever is on that ship, whatever is pulling it toward us, we won't outrun it." The ship grew larger, its silhouette now clearly visible. Jagged, dark, it seemed to shift and pulse, as though it were alive. The very stars around it seemed to bend, distorted by the unnatural force of its presence. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. She could feel it now, inside her, crawling along her skin, burrowing deep into her mind. The hum, the low thrum, the Lazarus Core, now resonated within her very bones. It was alive in her, it had followed her, and there was no escape. Adrian gripped the seat, his face drawn tight with determination. "We have no choice now. We have to face it." The ship's shape was undeniable now. It was almost upon them, so close that Ilara could see the strange, glowing lights on its hull, like tendrils of energy reaching out into the blackness. The hum intensified, and Ilara's vision blurred. The walls of the pod seemed to warp, stretching, as if the fabric of reality itself were coming undone. And then, the darkness of space was broken. Chapter 10. The Void Beckons. 25 hours. Unknown ship. Adrift in the abyss. Captain Adrian Wells. Private log. Unsent. "We were never meant to survive this. Not this. Not what we've become. The Lazarus Core was never a cure. It was a doorway. The ship was upon them now. It loomed in front of the pod, a grotesque shifting mass of shadow and light that defied the laws of physics. The stars around it twisted, bending in unnatural arcs as if the very fabric of reality was warping around the ship. Adrian's mind reeled, the sight too much for any human to process. It wasn't just a ship, it was alive, and it had come for them. Adrian's heart hammered in his chest as he stared through the viewport. The very air around them seemed to pulse, with energy, with something ancient, something unfathomable. He could feel the hum deep in his bones, vibrating through the pod like a constant insidious whisper. It was pulling them in. Ilara was still sitting motionless in the seat beside him, her hands gripping the armrests, her breath shallow. She wasn't looking at the ship. Her eyes were closed, her face pale, lips moving soundlessly as though whispering to something only she could hear. Adrian reached out to her, shaking her lightly. "Ilara, we need to move. This thing, it's not just a ship, it's—" But he didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. She opened her eyes and the look on her face stopped him cold. There was a certain understanding in her gaze, something hollow, something broken, but also resigned. "It's alive, Adrian. It's the Lazarus Core, what we've unleashed. It's inside us." The words hit him harder than any blow. They had all felt it, that dark, growing presence. The way their thoughts had been invaded. The whispers, the cold sensation crawling across their skin, the memories that hadn't been their own. It wasn't just the Lazarus Core that had followed them. It was everything it had awakened. The station, the dead, the darkness. The ship in front of them grew larger still, its form twisting as though it were bending space itself. Adrian could see faint glowing lines running across its surface like veins pulsing with energy. But it wasn't energy, not exactly. It was something else, something older, something that reached through the stars, through the very fabric of the universe, and beckoned to them. "We have to stop it." Adrian's voice was hoarse, his mind fighting to stay focused. He could feel the grip of panic closing around him, tightening like a noose. There's got to be a way to stop it, a way to— But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. There was no stopping it. "We've already opened the door," Ilara said, her voice distant, as though speaking from somewhere far away. "It's not a door, Adrian. It's a gate. The Lazarus Core wasn't meant to bring the dead back. It was meant to open the way to something else. To them." Adrian felt his stomach twist in horror, his mind struggling to keep up with the implications of her words. "To what? What the hell are you talking about?" Ilara's eyes locked onto his, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her every word. "To the ones who created the Lazarus technology, the ones who were here before us, the ones who never left." For a moment, Adrian couldn't breathe. The thought of it was too much. He could feel the weight of the entire universe pressing down on him, threatening to crush him. The realization slowly unfurled like a nightmare come to life. The Lazarus Core hadn't just been a tool for resurrection. It had been a doorway to something else, a being, a force ancient beyond measure waiting to be awakened. The station wasn't just a research facility. It had been a temple, a vessel of worship and sacrifice, a place where the boundary between life and death was never meant to be crossed. And they had crossed it. "We didn't survive. We never were supposed to survive," Ilara whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship drawing closer. "We were just chosen to be part of their plan, to open the way for them." Adrian's hand gripped the pod's controls, the thrusters sputtering in a desperate attempt to push them forward. But it was no use. They were caught. They were trapped in the gravitational pull of the ship, no escape. The ship had them. The core had them. We can't outrun it. We can't fight it. "But we can choose," Ilara said, her voice soft now, almost a whisper. "We can choose to face it, to end it." Adrian stared at her, disbelief washing over him. "What are you saying?" Her eyes locked onto his, steady and unwavering. "We have to stop the core, whatever it is, whatever they are. We can't let them—" But her words were cut off as the ship shifted once again. The entire pod shook violently as if the very fabric of space were warping around them. The walls of the pod groaned under the pressure, and the humming sound reached a deafening crescendo. Adrian turned to look out the viewport one last time. The ship had closed the distance between them. They were almost within reach now. The massive, twisted form loomed over them, filling the entire view with its grotesque shape. The air in the pod grew colder, the hum louder, and then the voice came. "You are ours." The voice was not Liam's. It was not Nico's. It was 1,000 voices, a chorus of whispers, of things that had never been human. "We were never meant to leave," Ilara said, her voice barely audible above the growing sound of the entity's power. "We were always meant to be part of the core, To bring it back, to bring them back. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest as the full realization set in. They were already lost. They had been lost from the moment they awoke the Lazarus Core. Are the last. The words rang in his mind like a death knell, and in that moment Adrian understood. They were not the first. They would not be the last. The Lazarus Core was just a piece of the puzzle, a puzzle that stretched back across the stars, across time itself. The ship opened its maw. End chapter 10. The climax has arrived, and the true horror of the Lazarus Core is laid bare. Adrian and Ilara are no longer fighting for survival. They are fighting for their very humanity. The end is near, but is there any hope left? Would you like to explore what comes next, or perhaps focus on wrapping up the story in a certain direction? Let me know what you'd like to do next. Chapter 11. The End of the Line. 30 hours. Unknown ship, core chamber. Captain Adrian Wells. Private log. Unsent. There are moments in life when everything you thought you knew, everything you believed in, is ripped away. And all that's left is the undeniable truth of the darkness we've awakened. The ship had them. They were inside it now, swallowed whole by the very thing they had tried to escape. The pod had been dragged inside through some unseen force, the walls of the massive ship bending in strange, impossible angles. It had taken mere minutes for them to cross the threshold into this place, a place that defied every law of physics they knew. The walls were not walls at all, but living veins, pulsing with an energy that felt like death itself. Adrian could hear the low thrum, the pulse of the ship, resonating in his chest. It was the same hum they had heard on the station, the same hum that had invaded their thoughts, gnawing at their minds, eroding their sanity. But now it was louder, closer, almost as if it were breathing. Ilara stumbled beside him, her face drained of color, her body tense and trembling. She was staring at something ahead of them, her eyes wide, pupils dilated with horror. Adrian followed her gaze. At the center of the chamber, what could only be called the core, was a massive structure, glowing with an otherworldly light. It was like a twisted, broken version of the Lazarus Core they had once seen. But this was something worse, something ancient, something that had been waiting for them. "This is it," Ilara whispered, her voice barely a breath. "This is what the core was meant to become. This is what they were building." Adrian felt a chill crawl up his spine. They were standing in the heart of the thing they had awoken, and now they were its prey. The chamber itself was alive, its walls pulsing, its floor shifting like liquid underfoot. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, as if the very atmosphere was being warped by the entity that inhabited this place. Adrian's mind struggled to comprehend it. The ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a conduit, a bridge between worlds. The dead weren't dead. They were waiting. "What is it?" Adrian asked, though he already knew the answer. Ilara's voice trembled, but there was no fear in it. There was only understanding. "It's a hive, the Lazarus Core, and it was never just a technology. It was a way to link all of them together, to bring them back. The core is not just a device, it's a call. It was built to summon them, to bring them all back." Adrian's chest tightened. He could feel it, the pull, the way the ship's presence stretched out across his mind, reaching for him, wrapping around him. It was too late to fight it, it was too late to escape, but he had to try. "What happens if we destroy it?" Adrian asked, his voice firm, though his hands were shaking. He needed something, anything, he could hold on to in this nightmare. Ilara looked at him, her eyes hollow, her voice soft but resolute. "It won't. And it's too deep now. The core, it's not just a machine, it's connected to everything, to them. If we destroy it, the energy will ripple through space, and it'll tear the fabric of reality apart." Adrian's breath caught. "So what? We just give up? Let it consume us all?" Ilara took a step forward, her gaze fixed on the pulsing core. "No. We do something else. We don't just destroy it. We take it apart. We sever the connection. Adrian didn't understand, but he didn't have time to ask questions. He looked around the chamber, so vast, so alien, and then back at Ilara, whose gaze was distant, like she had already made her peace with whatever was coming next. "How?" he whispered, as if there was any hope left. Her lips pressed together, her eyes haunted. "We need to get to the central node, the one that controls the connection to the core. If we sever it, we might be able to break the chain, stop the transmission." Adrian didn't have a choice. He nodded, already moving toward the center of the chamber. The air crackled with an energy that felt alive. The walls seemed to watch them, the floor shifting beneath their feet as they walked forward, toward the heart of the ship. But just as they reached the central node, the sound of the whispers grew louder. The air thickened and the room seemed to grow colder. The hum became a roar in their ears, a constant thundering pulse that rattled their bones. The ship reacted to them, twisting, thrashing, alive with rage. Suddenly, a voice, no, voices, spoke. Their words incomprehensible, a cacophony of languages long forgotten. "You have come too far. You are ours now. There is no return. There is no escape." Adrian's skin crawled. He could feel the truth of the words deep inside him. They weren't just facing a ship. They were facing something much older, something that had been waiting for them. The floor cracked and someone rose from it. The shape was distorted, twisted. It was a human form, but elongated, bent at unnatural angles. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, its mouth opening in a silent scream. "We are the architects of this world, the bringers of life and death. The Lazarus Core is our gateway, and you—" But Ilara didn't wait for it to finish. She rushed toward the central node, pulling out a tool from her pack. Adrian didn't hesitate. He moved to cover her, firing at the creature that lunged toward them, the blast barely slowing it down. The thing didn't feel pain. It was pain. Ilara worked quickly, her fingers shaking as she pried open the panel. The creature kept coming, and Adrian shot again, this time grazing its form, sending it reeling back. But it was only a momentary distraction. "Hurry, Ilara!" Adrian shouted, panic rising in his throat. Finally, Ilara found what she was looking for, a twisted metallic interface. She yanked it free, the ship's screams intensifying around them. The air crackled with power. With one final pull, the node sparked and flared. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship trembled violently. The hum stopped. The ship shuddered, as though it were breathing its last. And then, the darkness took over. Adrian felt his body pulled into the abyss. The core pulsed one last time, and the ship collapsed around them. Ilara's scream echoed in his ears, and then, nothing. Chapter 12. Into the Void, 350 Hours. Adrift in the Dark, Captain Adrian Wells. Private Log, Final Entry. We have crossed the threshold. There's no going back now. And the silence. It's deafening. The void was endless. There was no up, no down. Just the oppressive blackness that surrounded them. A vast emptiness that swallowed every trace of light, every fragment of sound. Adrian's chest ached as he floated, weightless, the remnants of the ship, if it could even be called a ship, disintegrating around him. The place that had once been their prison was now a shattered ruin, scattered across the cold expanse of space. He didn't know where Ilara was. He couldn't see her. He couldn't hear her. The last moments of the core's destruction had been nothing short of chaos. The hum, the pulse, the unbearable pressure that had shattered their minds, their bodies. He remembered none of it clearly. All he remembered was the overwhelming sense that they were not alone as the core collapsed, the ship crumbling with it. The walls warped. The very fabric of reality seemed to tear apart, and then darkness. And now they were adrift in it, alone. Adrian had no idea if Ilara had made it out, if she had survived. He had no idea if he had survived. But there was no escape. There was nothing to escape to. The Lazarus Core was gone, but its legacy, whatever had been unleashed, remained. Somewhere, deep in the darkness, something was waiting. He could feel Adrian's fingers brushed against his face, and he realized that his face was wet. Tears. Sweat. Blood. He didn't know. The emptiness made it impossible to discern what was real anymore. But there was something else, too. A pressure in his skull. A voice in his head. Faint at first, like a whisper just out of reach. But it was there. A voice that echoed from deep within the core of his mind. It was them. We are the architects, the keepers of the gate, the ones who have always watched. You cannot escape what you have brought. The voice was like 1,000 whispers, blending into a singular sound that rippled through his brain, vibrating through his very thoughts. He wanted to scream, to shout, but his body didn't obey. His limbs were numb, his mind hazy, like he was trapped in a waking nightmare. The whispers came again, louder this time, as though they were pressing against his skull. You are a part of us now, as we are a part of you. This is the cost of awakening the core, the price of bringing us back. Adrian's eyes flew open, but all he saw was blackness. Not the void of space, but something inside his mind. A vast, suffocating blackness. He felt himself being pulled into it. He could feel it, the sensation of something pulling him closer, deeper. His breath quickened. His heart raced. No, this couldn't be real. It couldn't. He tried to push the voices away, tried to scream, tried to fight, but it was useless. You are ours. The words reverberated through his skull. You are the chosen vessel. You will carry us, always, forever. Adrian's body spasmed as if some unseen force was taking hold of him, weaving into his very essence. He could feel the core, still alive inside him, embedded deep within his mind. The ship's destruction had been the catalyst, but it hadn't truly ended. It had only begun. The Lazarus Core had never been just a machine. It was a bridge, a conduit, and now he and Alara were part of it. No. Adrian's voice was barely a whisper, but it was a defiance, a threat of will. No, I won't be your vessel. But the force inside him pushed back. His vision blurred. The darkness consumed him. There was no escape. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. He felt them inside his bones, inside his mind. There was no difference between the two anymore. The core was in him. The ship was in him. And they were not going away. Suddenly, a sharp electric shock coursed through his body, forcing him to gasp for air. His vision returned, if only for a moment. And then, for the first time in what felt like eternity, he heard a voice. A real voice, not one in his mind. A sound that broke through the endless static. Adrian. It was Alara. Her face appeared before him, pale and bruised, but alive. Her eyes were wide with panic, her hands trembling as she reached for him. Alara? Adrian gasped, his voice hoarse. You're alive. Alara didn't answer. She looked at him, fear and understanding written across her face. She knew. They both knew. The core hadn't been destroyed. It hadn't died. It had only moved, shifted, taken root in them. Her voice broke through his haze of panic. Adrian, you feel it, don't you? It's inside us, all of it. We are the core now. It's too late. Adrian's mind spun. The truth was undeniable, and it shattered whatever had been left of him. He had tried, he had fought, but the battle had never been his to win. They were trapped in the very thing they had tried to escape. No, Adrian whispered, his voice barely audible over the whispers that had taken over his thoughts. We can't be the last. Ilara's expression darkened as she looked down at her hands, her fingers twitching as if they were no longer her own. We are the last, Adrian, and we are only the beginning. In that moment, Adrian understood. The Lazarus Core had been a doorway, but they were the gatekeepers now, and the dark forces beyond the gate had come to claim what was theirs. As the voices rose once more, the whispers became clear, and Adrian felt them inside him, around him, tearing apart what was left of his humanity. They were everywhere now, inescapable. And as the darkness swallowed them both, one last thought flickered through Adrian's mind. They had opened the door, but they were never meant to close it. Epilogue. The Infinite Cycle, 2300 hours. Abandoned research station, Lazarus Complex unknown. Final transmission. The silence was suffocating. The station that had once buzzed with life, buzzed with hope, ambition, and the relentless drive to conquer death, was now nothing more than a forgotten relic. Its halls, once filled with the voices of scientists and engineers, were now eerily quiet. The faint hum of machinery that had once powered the Lazarus Core was gone. The lights flickered, their illumination weak, as if the very building itself were struggling to hold on to life. In the deepest chamber of the station, the core remained, or rather, its presence remained. For the Lazarus Core had never truly been a machine. It had always been a link, a connection, a doorway to something far older and far darker. The logs had stopped long ago. No more transmissions had been sent. The crew's disappearance was now but a whisper in the archives, a vague entry in the station's incomplete history. But the Lazarus Complex still stood, as if waiting, but not alone. Far above the station, in the cold expanse of space, a massive shape emerged from the blackness. It was not a ship. No. It was something more. It had no physical form as humans understood it. It was energy. It was void. It was presence, consciousness, and darkness woven into one. The ancient architects had returned, and they had come for what was theirs. From within the Lazarus Complex, a signal activated. It was faint at first, buried under years of silence. But the core responded. It stirred. The dormant energy within it flared to life. The signal did not call for help. It did not request anything from the universe. It reached out. A single flicker of light erupted in the station's communication hub, the only sign that anything was still alive. The message, if it could even be called that, was cryptic, barely a whisper of sound over the static. We are the keepers. We are the end of life and the beginning of what lies beyond. Our vessel is prepared. Our gate is open. We await. The message repeated, growing louder with each cycle, as though calling to something or someone. Something that was still lost in the vast dark, a darkness now infused with the essence of the Lazarus Core itself. Elsewhere, far from the station's ruins, the fate of Adrian and Alara remained hidden. There were whispers now from the deep reaches of the universe, space stations gone silent, ships disappearing without a trace, anomalies in the fabric of space-time, and in the darkness something stirred, something ancient, something that had been waiting for far too long. Somewhere, in the blackness of the void, a final voice echoed. The cycle begins anew. As the station continued to fade into the forgotten corners of space, the eternal question hung unanswered. Had they truly ended the Lazarus Core, or had they merely opened the door to the next phase? End of Lazarus Core. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know in the comments what ideas you would like the next story to be about. Please leave a thumbs up, share, subscribe, comment.